The storm howled against the cliffs as Sarah picked up the letter. Her name scrawled in an elegant, venomous hand. You think it's over? Ask Chun about Subject Zero. Her pulse pounded. Behind her, Alexander's face went pale. Who's Subject Zero? She whispered. A long silence. Then, in a hollow voice, Me. Before she could react, the phone rang. A distorted voice murmured, Eclipse rises. Alexander's eyes glazed over. His body went rigid. Command accepted. And outside, a black SUV pulled up to the gates. The fog clung to the cliffs like a shroud as Sarah Mitchell and her 7-year-old daughter Emma stepped from the cab onto the gravel drive of the Morrison estate. The mansion loomed ahead, its Gothic spires piercing the mist, a silhouette of wealth and decay. Sarah's duffel bag dug into her shoulder, stuffed with their last possessions after the eviction notice had stripped them bare. Emma's small hand trembled in hers, her hazel eyes wide. Mommy, it's like the witch's castle in my book, she whispered, clutching her stuffed rabbit. It's our new start, sweetheart, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The caretaker job, $8,000 a month, room board, was a lifeline she couldn't refuse. Enough to afford Emma's asthma inhalers, a decent school, maybe even a shred of stability. But as the cab vanished into the fog, leaving them at the iron gates, Sarah felt the weight of the unknown settle over her. The gates groaned open, revealing Victoria Hayes, a woman carved from ice, tall, sharp-cheeked, her gray eyes assessing Sarah like a predator sizing up prey. You're late, Victoria snapped, her tone crisp as the sea wind. Mr. Morrison doesn't abide tardiness, even now. Sarah nodded, guiding Emma through a maze of shadowed halls. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors glared from the walls, their oil-paint eyes tracking her steps. Chandeliers dripped with cobwebs, and the air smelled of dust and secrets. Victoria's briefing was curt. Alexander Morrison, biotech tycoon, vegetative after a car crash 6 months ago. Sarah's duties were simple: monitor his vitals, administer his meds, keep him alive. Yet the rules were barbed. No guests, no snooping, no questions. The last caretaker left in a huff, Victoria added, her lips thinning. Couldn't handle the quiet. Alexander's room was a tomb of technology. Beeping monitors, a ventilator's rhythmic hiss, and him, a man suspended between life and death. Mid-40s, silver threading his dark hair, he lay motionless in a hospital bed, his chiseled face hauntingly serene. A feeding tube snaked from his nose, and his eyes stared at nothing. Emma tiptoed closer, whispering, He looks like a sleeping prince. He's just resting, Sarah said, smoothing Emma's hair. But as she adjusted his pillow, a shiver ran through her. His head tilted, barely imperceptibly, toward her touch. A trick of the light, she told herself, but the unease lingered. The first week blurred into routine. Sarah learned the mansion's creaks, memorized Alexander's med schedule, and kept Emma occupied with crayons and fairy tales. The staff, a gaunt cook named Mrs. Pelham and a mute gardener, Jonas, spoke in hushed tones about predecessors who'd fled. One claimed the walls whispered. Another saw shadows move. Sarah dismissed it as gossip until the 7th night. She sat by Alexander's bed, reading Emma the Princess and the P over the phone from their cramped room downstairs. The ventilator hummed, a steady drone when a rasp cut through it. Help me. Sarah's breath caught. Alexander's lips were still, but his fingers twitched, brushing her wrist. She leaned closer, pulse racing, but the sound faded. Exhaustion, she decided. Single motherhood had frayed her nerves to threads. Yet doubt gnawed at her. The next day, while Emma doodled in the kitchen under Mrs. Pelham's watchful eye, Sarah searched Alexander's room. Beneath a loose floorboard, she found a leather notebook, its pages brittle and scrawled with his frantic script. One entry jolted her. The garden holds a key. Code, July 19th, 82. They know I know. Trust no one. Another page mentioned Jinan Pharmaceuticals, a name tied to Morrison Biotech, and a cryptic acronym, CSP. That night, Sarah slipped into the garden, a wilderness of thorns and wilted roses behind the mansion. The shed, forbidden by Victoria, squatted in the center, its padlock glinting under her flashlight. She punched in July 19th, 82, Alexander's birthday, from his file, and the lock sprang open. Inside, a laptop word to life, displaying a file, consciousness-suppressing prototype, CSP, a drug to paralyze the mind, leaving the body pliable, military applications, controllable soldiers, side effects, coma, memory loss, death, a scribbled note in the margin. They tested it on me. Her knees buckled. Was Alexander's crash a cover-up? Before she could copy the file, footsteps crunched outside. She killed the light, crouching behind a crate as Victoria's voice hissed. She's been out here. Check the shed. Jonas's silhouette loomed, then retreated. Sarah waited, heart pounding, until silence returned, then fled with a laptop tucked under her coat. The estate became a cage of shadows. Sarah swapped Alexander's unlabeled 4-vial with Celine, praying it was CSP and not something vital. She noticed anomalies. Black SUVs arriving at dusk, their occupants vanishing into the east wing, security cameras flickering off for hours, Victoria's late-night calls, her tone clipped and coded, and then at midnight, Alexander's fingers tapped her wrist, slow, deliberate. SOS. He was trapped, awake in a prison of flesh. She kept Emma close, weaving lies about Mommy's busy work to shield her from the dread coiling in Sarah's chest. But Victoria's scrutiny sharpened. One evening, as Sarah scrubbed dishes, Victoria loomed in the doorway. "You've been poking around the garden," she said, her voice a velvet threat. Jonas saw footprints. "I was weeding," Sarah lied, her hands trembling in the suds. Victoria's smile was venomous. "See that you stick to your duties." Sleep became a luxury Sarah couldn't afford. She rigged a makeshift alarm, string and a bell, across their bedroom door. Her night spent deciphering the notebook. It hinted at conspiracy. Alexander had uncovered CSP's misuse and threatened to expose Jinan. The crash was staged, his coma induced. But who was they? Victoria? Someone higher? The answer came on a storm last night. Sarah woke to footsteps, not the staff's familiar shuffle, but heavy boots. She hit Emma in the closet with her rabbit, whispering, "Stay quiet, baby," then raced Alexander's room. Victoria stood there with a man in military fatigues, General James Harrison, his name stitched in gold. A syringe gleamed in his hand, filled with a sickly green liquid. "She's a liability," Victoria said, nodding at Sarah. "Test a new batch on her. If it works, we've got proof for the Pentagon." Sarah's mind raced. Harrison advanced, his grin predatory. "Hold still, sweetheart. You'll be a hero for science." She backed toward Alexander's bed, groping for anything, a weapon, a shield. Then, a guttural choke. Alexander's eyes flew open, blazing with fury. He ripped the feeding tube free, rasping, "No!" Chaos erupted. Victoria lunged, pinning Sarah's arms. Harrison raised a syringe, but Alexander flailed, toppling a monitor. Sparks flew, igniting a curtain. Sarah twisted free, grabbing a scalpel from the tray and slashing Victoria's forearm. The woman howled, dropping her grip as the door splintered open. Black-clad figures stormed in, not Harrison's men, but FBI agents, led by a wiry man with glasses, Dr. Marcus Chun. "Drop it. You're under arrest." Chun shouted. Harrison fired a wild shot, shattering a window, but agents tackled him. Victoria clawed for the syringe, only to be cuffed mid-lunge. Chun approached Sarah, his voice calm amid the smoke. "You're safe. We've been after Jinan for months. Alexander's crash was no accident. CSP overdose, staged to bury him." Alexander slumped, gasping, as Sarah clutched his hand. "Thank you," he croaked. Agents swarmed, seizing the laptop and notebook pages she'd stashed. Chun dropped a bombshell. Presumed dead in a lab explosion 2 years ago, he'd faked it to infiltrate Jinan under witness protection. Sarah's photos of the vial and shed sealed their case. Recovery was a slow thaw. Alexander emerged from his haze, haunted by fragmented memories. Lab lights, needles, a life he couldn't reclaim. He and Sarah bonded over late-night talks. Her struggles as a single mom, his guilt over CSP's creation, their shared defiance. Emma adored him, dubbing him Sir Alex after her nights. The estate softened with their laughter, the garden blooming under their care. 6 months later, under a gnarled oak, Alexander knelt. "You gave me back my life," he said, offering a ring. "Let me share mine with you." Sarah said yes, tears blurring the petals Emma scattered at their wedding. Morrison Biotech dissolved, its wealth funding the Morrison Mitchell Foundation for Single Parents, a legacy of redemption. Victoria and Harrison faced trial, their plot unraveling on national news. Chin became a quiet ally, attending the ceremony with a rare smile. But peace was a fragile veneer. A year later, as Sarah sorted foundation mail, a letter arrived. No return address, postmarked from a federal prison. Victoria's elegant scrawl read, "You think it's over? Ask Chun about Subject Zero." Sarah's hand shook. Alexander found her staring at it, his face draining of color. "Who's Subject Zero?" she demanded. He sank into a chair, voice hollow. "Me." Before CSP, there had been a prototype, Mindforge, designed to rewrite consciousness, not just suppress it. Alexander was his first subject, a willing volunteer in his early days at Jinon, erasing swathes of his past. "I don't know who I was before," he confessed. "A soldier? A scientist? They burned it out of me." Sarah's mind reeled. "And Chin knows." He must. Jinon buried it. But if Victoria's hinting at this, he trailed off, eyes darting to the window. A shadow flickered. Jonas, pruning roses or something else. The gardener had vanished after the raid, never questioned. Suspicion flared. That night, Sarah called Chun, her voice tight. "What's Subject Zero?" A long pause. "Meet me tomorrow," he said. Not over the phone. They met at a diner on the highway, rain streaking the windows. Chun looked haggard, his glasses fogged. Subject Zero was a beginning, he admitted. Alexander volunteered for Mindforge in '98. It worked too well, erased his identity, made him a blank slate. Jinon rebuilt him as their golden boy, fed him a fake past. When he dug into CSP, they used it again to silence him. Sarah gripped her coffee mug. Is he still in danger? Chin hesitated. Mindforge had a failsafe, a trigger phrase to reactivate the programming. Victoria knows it. If she's writing you, someone's pulling strings. Back home, Sarah and Alexander locked the doors. Emma's asleep upstairs. The phone rang, an unknown number. She answered and a distorted voice purred. "Tell Alexander, Eclipse rises." He froze, eyes glazing over. "Command accepted," he intoned, robotic, then collapsed. Sarah screamed, shaking him awake. He blinked, disoriented. "What happened?" "They're coming," she whispered, clutching the scalpel from that fateful night. The wind howled, and a black SUV idled at the gate. Jonas stepped out, his mute facade gone, a gun in hand. The fairy tale wasn't over. It was a nightmare reborn.